Welcome to the Rude Dude Recovery Big Book Workshop. This is a workshop where no dogma allowed. And what I mean by dogma is things you would hear in meetings around the country. Call your sponsor every day, 90 meetings in 90 days, don't get in relationships, certain things that are not in the big book and seem to be everywhere in Alcoholics Anonymous, but are not in the big book and have nothing to do with recovery. The most important tool in this particular workshop is a mind of consideration. A mind of consideration. Now, when I got sober, these men made it very clear that the least important thing here was how I felt. The least important thing in the world is what a newcomer feels or thinks. And that kind of hurt my feelings, but they were absolutely right. So this is a no dogma allowed big book workshop, and welcome. The first thing I like to use is this triangle as just a teaching tool, a teaching instrument. Things that I want to say starting out here is a couple things. I'm not an expert in the big book. I'm only an expert in my story. And unfortunately, I have a speech impediment, and that sometimes takes away from the message, but please bear with me and listen to the message rather than how it's presented. So what I would do, use this triangle as a teaching tool. The first thing is unity, recovery, service. Now the fellowship has its own idea about what this is and what it means. The book has something entirely different. A little bit different in certain things. Like unity, recovery would be about the same, but service is the aspect that the fellowship and the book differs on. So the first thing is what is unity? Unity is one drunk helping another. It's this common peril, as described at page 17. Our common peril is but one element in the powerful cement that binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we're now joined. The way it was explained to me is that everybody coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, they have one thing in common. One basic thing in common is that our bodies do not process alcohol correctly. And because of this allergy, I get overserved, and the obsession is I need to drink to feel better, but I keep getting overserved, and so I come to meetings and I hear people who drink like I do and who think like I do, and who get in trouble like I do, and so unity is where we come to meet, and it's where I first discovered that I wasn't alone. It talks about this on page 18. It says that the man who's making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he's talking about, that his whole department shouts at the new prospect, here's a man with a real answer, that he's had no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except a sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no dues to pay, no axes to grind, no lectures to be endured, no people to please. And this is what I found most attractive when this particular fellowship that I started out in. And so unity is the allergy, is our inability to keep ourselves sober. So then what is recovery, right? What is recovery? Recovery is a personality change, as the book describes, or a psychic change. Is a personality change, is where I look at the world differently. I look at me differently. A recovery is kind of described as this, is that let's say we're riding down a busy freeway at Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, the freeway's jammed. We're in our car all by ourselves. We're just screaming to the top of our lungs, what the heck are you people doing here? Right? And most people can relate to this. We're just so aggravated about this traffic. What are you doing here? And so this recovered thought, or this change of mind, a change of this psychic change is we've been in the same traffic jam before on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, and then all of a sudden, the window rolled down, we're listening to music, and we're just chilling, and we think to ourselves, this is the way it's supposed to be on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. And so nothing externally has changed, and that's recovery. That's a psychic change, or a personality change or a spiritual experience, is where the world remains the same and our outlook on it has changed. So that's what this whole purpose is about. This whole program is to get recovered. So and the third legacy here is on service, and I understand what the fellowship talks about, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind about this. I'm describing as it's presented in the book. The most primary part about this we're talking about in the book is on page 98 in working with others. It says it's not a matter of giving that's in question, but when and how to give that often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commits to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he can't master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. That's the shortest sentence in the book. Page 98, it says nonsense. We've learned the truth has been demonstrated again and again. Bring the idea into every man. He can get well regardless. The only thing is that you rely on a power greater than himself. Right? So that's, so service is not in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It would challenge you with this. How can working with others or making coffee for a meeting or being a secretary at a meeting or leading a meeting or chairing a meeting, how can that be anything other than unity, where one drunk talks to another? The service aspect of this is really clearly defined or described on page 131. See, it's where we take this recovered spirit out, this new attitude towards life out to the real world, and we see how can we benefit mankind. On page 131, it says that they were supposed to make new acquaintances who know nothing of alcoholism and attend to their needs. We're trying to make the world a better place to be. Yeah, okay, so this is the table of contents. And this is how the program is laid out. It starts out with a doctor's opinion. I'm just going to read the chapters. There's a doctor with an opinion. He's got an opinion about Bill, so Bill tells the story. Bill says there's a solution, but first let's talk more about alcoholism. It's a spiritually-based program as described in We Gnostics. That's how it works. How it works means you get into action. Into action means you work with others. Most of us have wives, families, jobs, and this is our vision for you. So the program in the book understands more than likely you're going to start out under doctor's care. We don't get here because we had a bad day. Right? We get here because a series of unfortunate events, so to speak. We didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I think I'm going to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So, so as a doctor's opinion describes what the problem is, all the way from the spiritual aspect to the physical aspect, and even describes what the solution is, and tells stories about people that they've met, the doctor met. But unfortunately, Dr. Silkworth is not an alcoholic, but he just knows about it from a medical standpoint. And so who best relate to alcoholics rather than alcoholic? So Bill tells the story, and then Bill describes the solution that was given to him through Dr. Silkworth and the Oxford group. And then there's more about alcoholism, because nobody likes to think they're bodily and mentally different from their fellows. And they list, and there's more about alcoholism in the doctor's opinion, which you'll find out as we go through this thing. The doctor's opinion describes 5 types of drinkers. In the chapter more about alcoholism, they tell stories about 4 of the 5 type of alcoholics. In the chapter We Gnostics, it has the second step and the unmanageability. Page 44 and 52 is the unmanageability. So, and the second step, how it works, has steps 3 and 4. This is how it works, steps 3 and 4, right? Make a decision and search diligently is how it works. The chapter 6, Into Action, has 7 steps and 17 pages. So the authors of this book, although Into Action is important, it's not the main emphasis. Powerless over alcohol is the main emphasis. These authors of these 100 people spend about 53 pages just on the first half of the first step alone, powerless over alcohol. And the 7 steps, 17 pages into action, and then obviously working with others is a 12th step of the whole entire chapter written on that. Working with others, the 12th step has 3 different parts, which we're going to talk about in this workshop. And we carry these principles, the first 7 chapters, we carry these principles into relationships, to the wives, to the families, and to our jobs. Page 19 says a much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in respect of homes, occupations, and affairs. So again, it's really easy to behave in meetings. How are we doing at home? How are we doing with the family afterwards? And how are we doing at work? And the last chapter is called A Vision for You, which is so important. And A Vision for You is not, our book is meant to be suggestive only. Just crap. And I'm sure that it is to a certain, meant to be suggestive only. But when you tell a newcomer that, when they hear this being read at a meeting, these authors of this book are telling you that this is how we get sober, and all of a sudden this fellowship stands up and reads, our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. It's important that as you go through this thing that you read the paragraph above that, and find out what they're talking about. Right? This is an example of how we can take one thing from the book and put it into any conversation and have it take on a brand new meaning, an entirely different meaning. An example of that, I know I'm getting on a soapbox here, an example of taking something totally out of context is, and you hear, and you probably hear this a lot, this is a rigorously honest program. That's not what the book says. It's not what the book means. It says those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living that demands rigorous honesty. So grasping and developing is the key word. Grasping and developing a manner of living, and that's through a process. Through a process. If I believed I needed to be rigorously honest, I'd wind up, telling a 6-year-old girl there's no Santa Claus, and who would benefit from that? If I tried to be rigorously honest, my self-righteousness would hurt a lot of people. And so what the authors of this book meant is grasping and developing a manner of living, that we can look inside and get honest with ourselves about who we are and what the world sees. So there's a big difference between what the book says and what we think it says. So if you look off to the right here, I just this page, right, this is where the steps are laid out. I got the first step broken down. And it doesn't make it cut in stone. This, for the purpose of this book study, this is what it is. Right? The second step is on page 47. Right? It's a question. The third step is 60, right? 60, 63, so on and so on. And to the right of that column, I list the 4 sets of promises, and I'm sure that there are more promises in the book. Well, I know they are, but just for the simple fact and the simplicity of this particular workshop, these are the set of promises that I listed. The 3rd step promises, the 5th step promises, the 9th step promises, and the 10th step promises. All right, so next page is the preface. And what I like to do here with the preface is this describes the purpose of the book, right? It says, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists a strong sentiment getting radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program. It's not going to describe a suggested AA recovery program. It's going to describe the AA recovery program. Has been left largely untouched, and course revisions made in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th edition, right, and the section called the Doctor's Opinion kept intact. It goes on to explain some things. So the point of this, and this is why I bring in this preface up, is if it's not in this book, regardless of what it is, regardless of how good it is, or how spiritual it is, if it's not in this book, it is not the AA recovery program. It's somebody else's version. It may be a good version. It may work for a lot of people, but it is not the AA recovery program. If you feel like it's spiritual to go down the park standing on your head naked, then by all means go down the park and stand on your head naked. If saying a prayer, memorizing prayers, spiritual for you, wonderful. By all means do that, but don't tell a newcomer to do it. It is not the A recovery program. Um, at what point is it acceptable to change this written text? Is it acceptable to say to call me every day? Is it acceptable to say let's sit down and read the book together? Is it acceptable to say stay out of relationships in your first year? Or is it going too far to say if you're on medication you're not sober? And who gets to decide what is acceptable change to this program? Who gets to decide what's the acceptable change and what's going too far? The newcomer certainly doesn't get to decide. They're coming to you and to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous asking for help because they can't stop drinking, and whatever you tell them is what they're going to believe the program is. And what happens if you tell them just don't drink no matter what and call me before you drink? What happens if they're a real alcoholic and they're not able to do that, and they believe that everybody in the room is just not drinking no matter what and going to 90 meetings in 90 days and thinking through the drink and staying out of a relationship? What happens when they can't do that? And they believe that's what the program is. And they start to get really, I came here for help, and these people can't help me. I must be really bad. I must be bad. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and even they can't help me. And so we've just killed somebody. We've just possibly killed somebody by sharing dogma with them. Right? Please tell them the truth. Please tell them this is your opinion. It's not the program, but this is my opinion. So it says, because this book has become the basic text for our society, and it's helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery. So the first thing I'd like to ask here, and this again is a mind of consideration, is this is the basic text. A basic text in this particular case, if I were opening up a book to learn English, right, it'd be an English textbook. If I open up a book for math, it'd be a mathematical textbook. This is a spiritual textbook. And the purpose for this particular textbook is to transmit a spiritual experience or to transmit a personality change. And the way this happens with this piece of literature is this spiritual experience or personality change will happen without your consent. Now let me repeat that. This piece of literature, as written as is, and we follow along and we do what exactly they said they did when they said to do it without adding anything or taking anything away from it, this spiritual experience happens without our consent. That's the beauty of this. It takes me as a recovered member out of the equation. It takes my sponsor completely out of the equation and puts it squarely into this book over these first 100 people. So I get right back to my first statement about this whole thing. At what point is it acceptable to change the written program? And at what point is it going too far, and who gets to decide? So if this book's purpose is to transmit a spiritual experience or personality change, is it possible? Is it possible that what I think I know about alcoholism is the biggest noose around my neck to learning anything else about alcoholism? Is it possible that what I think I know about myself is the biggest noose around my neck to learning anything else about myself? And is it possible that what I think I know about God and what I think about God, is it possible that that's my biggest obstacle to learning about God and finding a God? And so what this entire mind of consideration or this workshop is all about is it possible that every spiritual exercise, every spiritual experience has to begin and end with questions? If I come into this exercise with answers, is it possible that I shut myself off from learning anything new? Is it possible that what I think I know about God is the biggest noose around my neck to finding a God? Right? And so every spiritual journey begins and ends with questions. Am I alcoholic? What does it mean to be alcoholic? When I start to drink, can I guarantee how much I'm going to drink? If somebody who loved me asked me to stop, can I stop and stay stopped? Who am I resentful at? What did they do? What does it affect? What were my mistakes? So every spiritual journey, as described in this book, begins and ends with questions. So the first edition, or forward to the first edition, and this is where I try to help people understand how to read the book and read it for what it says and not what we think it says. That may seem like a kind of a stupid thing, given we're all can read. We're pretty intelligent people, but when we read something, automatically our minds convert it to what we think it says or what we want it to say, rather than what it actually says. So it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we've recovered is the main purpose of this book. So ask a newcomer, ask somebody reading this, what is the main purpose of this book? And you have them read it, and 8 times out of 10 they're going to say to recover from alcoholism. And I'm going to say that's not what it says. And so they're going to reread it, and they say, okay, recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. We do not recover from alcoholism, but we do recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And what does it mean to recover from a seemingly hopeless state? It means I have hope. Right? And so it's very important to read this for what it says and not what we think it says. The most important element here in it is the very first one. We of Alcoholics Anonymous. So anywhere in this book where they use the word we, us, or our, like rarely have we seen a person fail, they're talking about the first 100 people who wrote the book. They're not talking about me. They're not talking about you, right? They're not talking about your sponsor or your Aunt Harry. Right? They're talking about the first 100 people who wrote the book. On page 19, it says, we have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to our task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. And so the most important thing here is, as you read this book, primarily the first 43 pages, which is the first step, understanding that these 100 people who wrote the book are going to write down their examples. They're going to write down how they drank, how they felt, and how they thought. They're going to tell you their story, and then from 43 to 58, which is the second step, we agnostics are going to explain to you what the solution is and kind of give you some things to ponder. And in the chapter how it works, this is how it works. They're going to tell you the practical program of action to treat this, right? And so if you see a word or a phrase that's in italics, right, that in your mind's eye act like the author's just screaming at you, right? Because that's the main emphasis in there. To recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, to show others precisely how we recover is the main purpose of this book. Just kind of like fast forward a little bit, and I know I'm kind of bouncing around here a little bit, and I apologize. Where these 100 people are going to show you precisely how to recover begins on page 60 in a chapter called How It Works, where they say just what do we mean by that and just what do we do. So the foreword to the first edition teaches us how to read the book for what it says and not what we think it says. The main purpose of the book is to recover from a seemingly hopeless state. And if I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state, it means I have hope. And we, who is we, is the first 100 people who wrote this book. And when they describe how they drank, how they felt, and how they thought, I'm going to take their statements and turn them into questions and apply my own experience. All right? So here we go. This forward to the second edition. The most important thing as you read through these forwards, kind of look at the growth of the fellowship. It is tremendous. And the growth of the fellowship is huge. And this is the forward to the second edition, just kind of bits and pieces out of it. And the forward to the second edition has the tenets of the Oxford group. which are known as the AA principles. They contain why the traditions are in place. It gives you an example of recovery percentages. So the tenets of the Oxford Group is the main emphasis here. What I'd like to do or start with on the forward to the second edition. I'd go to the forward to the second edition and turn one page in. And about halfway down that first paragraph, you're going to see, from this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Couldn't accept all the tenets of the Oxford Group. He was convinced of the need of moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and necessity, independence, and belief in independence upon a God. So these are the 5 spiritual principles to Alcoholics Anonymous. These are the personality shift steps. This is what is written down. These are the directions given to help us have this personality change. The original program contained 6 steps, and they're listed on the 4th edition on page 263. And other than these 5 spiritual principles, the first one was powerless over alcohol, or they referred to as deflation, right? Where I can't do this, I'm powerless, I need help, right? And that's deflation. And so what happened is when Bill Wilson was writing this book, he got up to the 5th chapter, and couldn't really describe how it worked. So he broke each step up to 2, and it wound up with 12. And then as Bill says, that 12 is the number of the disciples. That's a nice round number. That's good. We'll leave it at that. So up until the chapter 5, it was like 60 pages, almost 60 pages. There were just 6 steps, and when they got to the chapter 5 is when Bill busted it up into each step into 2, and created a 12-step program. And that's why in the chapter how it works is where it first starts identifying what step you're on. Prior to that, it doesn't. But what this boils down to is these spiritual principles, the need for moral inventory. And what that means is can I find my mistakes, because I can certainly find yours. The second one, confession of personality defects. Can I tell somebody my deep, dark secrets? Can I tell somebody that thing that happened to me that night in that room, and just because I was there changed me? Can I tell somebody that thing that happened to me when I was a kid? It happened in my parents' basement or in that closet. Can I tell somebody my deep, dark secrets? Restitution to those harmed. The third spiritual principle is can I set right my mistakes? Can I go to somebody and correct my errors in judgment? The fourth one is, can I turn my thoughts into how I can help somebody else? Now, I don't know about anybody else, but the illness that I have kind of has a certain narcissistic quality to it, where I only think about me most of the time, and when I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about you thinking about me, right? So this illness that I have, or this alcoholism, has a certain narcissistic quality to it, and my furthest thing in the world is thinking about helping other people. And so that's the fourth spiritual principle. And the fifth one is can I develop a relationship with a power or dependence greater than myself, which is the 11th step, and it's the entire process. So this is just part of it. And the forward to the second edition also talks about all right. So step 1, powerless over alcohol lives had become unmanageable. This is the only step. This is the only step that's written past tense. This is a reflection step. It's not a step about what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I think about tomorrow. It's a step that concerns itself with the last 5 years of my drinking and using, of what my delusion is, of what the truth is, what really happened. And so the first question in the first step is, when I start to drink, can I guarantee how much I'm going to drink? And this is described. This is described in the doctor's opinion. And this is the only step that must be understood and taken 100%. The other steps are spiritual growth, kind of grasping and developing a manner of living, learning how to help other people, right? Growing into this thing. But this first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, lives had become unmanageable, has to be understood and has to be understood. It's a reflection step. And so the first part of this, and this is what helped me out so much, it says the doctor's opinion. If you go to the doctor's opinion and turn one page in, it says the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion to a soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. And so when I first got into this program, I was chased into these rooms by the sheriff's department, as many people were, and I went to this treatment center because I'm hiding from the cops. And in this treatment center, they introduced this theory to me that my body may not metabolize alcohol correctly, and that kind of floored me. It was a brand new information. This is not something that I ever discussed sitting in a bar with Joe. I didn't tap Joe on the shoulder. Hey, Joe, how's your phenomena craving going? I had no idea that the physical body, the alcoholic, could develop this allergy or this craving. It wasn't something that we discussed at the dinner table growing up. So I had no idea until I went to this treatment center, and thank God for treatment centers, did they start to explain this allergy thing to me. And once they did, as this said, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. And so when they presented me with this thought that my body may not metabolize alcohol, that it sets up this craving, that explained a whole lot of stuff. That explained why I would wind up in cornfields. That explained why with every knowledge of knowing that I had to be work the next morning, I'd wind up closing the bar down and then driving around looking for the next party. It explained things like alcohol is supposed to be a depressant, and when I drank, it did not depress me. It revved me up. It got me going. I was feeling kind of crappy when I first started drinking, and it would just change my entire outlook. And one drink demanded two drinks demanded four. The same guy who took the second drink is not the same guy who took the first drink. And so when I learned about this allergy, it made perfect sense. He says it explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. The next page is something that really kind of floored me, because this is where I started understanding exactly what was wrong with me. It says, we doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology is of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conceptions. What with our ultra-minor standards and our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. So what this doctor had the courage to do and to say is that doctors cannot help us. Doctors cannot fix us. Our problems lie outside their synthetic knowledge. And so I would read this thing. It says, we doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology. What the heck is moral psychology? And then I would be asked these questions. I would say, how many times have you been in the hospital because of drinking? I said, a couple times. And I even had beer smuggled into the hospital while I was there. And they say, what did you do after you got out of the hospital? I said, well, I had to go drink to think about it. And they say things like, how many times you've been in jail because of drinking and using? I say, a lot. So what did you do after you got out of jail? Well, I had to go drinking to think about it. And they just kind of chuckle at me and say, well, don't you believe that some form of moral psychology is of urgent importance to you, but how do we apply it? And so what they would say is these 5 spiritual principles that are going to be described in this book are the application of moral psychology. I'm crazy. My history proves that. And there's no way I can solve the problem with the same mind that got me into it. There's no way I can solve the problem with the same mind that got me into it. And again, this is where a spiritual journey begins and ends with questions. Next page, top of the next page, it says, we believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. that the phenomenon craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average tempered drinker. So these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they can't break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. So let's turn this doctor's statement into a bunch of questions. It says, we believe, as so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. What does a manifestation of an allergy mean? What does that big word mean? Manifestation of an allergy. If I were allergic to peanut butter, what would the manifestation of that allergy be? It would be swelling. It would be backaches. If I were allergic to strawberries, what would the manifestation of that allergy to strawberries be? It would be breaking out in hives. If I were allergic to bee stings, what would the manifestation of the allergy be? It would be swelling. It would be discomfort. I would need a shot, right? And so if I'm allergic to alcohol, what is the manifestation of that allergy? And it's a phenomenon. Craving is a manifestation of this allergy. I never knew that. And it is said it is limited to this class and never occurs in the average tempered drinker. So what is an average tempered drinker? An average tempered drinker is just have a couple, set it down, say, no, I don't want this anymore, right? So I'm not an average tempered drinker, but this phenomenon craving fits me to a T, and I never knew that, and that will never change. My filters are screwed up now. I'm a pickle. I can never be a cucumber anymore. I can never reverse what's happened to my body. So anytime I put alcohol in any form at all, doesn't matter if it's vodka, doesn't matter if it's Boone's Farm strawberry wine, doesn't matter if it's Ripple, doesn't matter if it's cognac. If I put alcohol in any form at all in my body, this phenomenon craving develops, right, and I'm screwed. So these allergic types, can I ever safely use alcohol in any form at all? I can't. Once having formed the habit and found I break it, have I formed the habit and I can't quit, right? Which is yes. I can't break it. Once having lost their self-confidence, did I? Yes, I did. Incomprehensible demoralization comes up. The reliance upon things human. You can't help me. I become a lone wolf. I hide out in my house, and my problems pile up on me, and they seem astonishingly difficult to solve. So this describes the allergy. It describes what the doctor's opinion is, and really what I realize is I'm screwed, right? So the problem is, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. Now, what the heck is frothy emotional appeal? And this is where I was blessed with these men and women. They would tell me very clearly that how I feel is insignificant. What a newcomer feels or thinks is totally irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. It's not important what a newcomer feels or thinks. And the frothy emotional appeal is things like that's described on page 20 of this book. And unfortunately, some of us have even muttered this stuff in meetings. Unfortunately, some of these things, this frothy emotional appeal, are things that we've told newcomers. And on page 20, it says how many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? So if I can do this, anybody can do this. If my story helps you, then anybody can do this. So why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? Just stop drinking. You should be able to quit. Right? Just come to meetings and stop. That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine, lay off the hard stuff? His willpower must be weak. We hear this all the time in meetings. Right? Think through the drink. Play the tape all the way through. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Now, what it says is, now these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. And so this is a 100% proof that there are people in Alcoholics Anonymous who are not alcoholic. They are hard drinkers. And they don't know that they're not alcoholic because when we describe our drinking to them, they fit that. When we describe us going to jail, they fit that. When we describe our life, it fits them. But they can stay sober on a non-spiritual basis. They can stay sober if given sufficient reason, such as a DUI, such as somebody who loved them asking them to stop. They can stop and stay stopped. They're not alcoholic. They're hard drinker. But the rooms are filled with hard drinkers because it's very difficult to separate the two. So, yeah. So frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. Now, what you're going to find, and what some people find, is that the very truth, starting out with the newcomer, seems very harsh and impersonal. Would you rather tell them the truth and let them process this for a day or two, or tell them we'll love you till you love yourself and not tell them the truth, and they wind up believing that that's what the program, and they try to stay sober and try to get sober on a lie. So we need to tell them the truth, right? We're doomed. For the effect produced by alcohol, men and women drink excessively because the effect produced by alcohol. Ask yourself, when you drank, did you care about personal relationships? Are they bothering you? When you drank, were you full of fear? Were you unhappy? Could you be a real help to other people? Right? Were you a prey to misery and depression? So when you drank, all those things went away. All those things went away. And when we're stone cold sober, these things come rushing back, and we don't have the mechanism to deal with them. This is just a mind of consideration. Is the effect we drink for is to get our minds to shut the hell up. Spinning around in circles. We have trouble with these personal relationships. We can't control our emotional nature. And when we drink, that all goes away. And so the program treats these bedevilments. This is what we treat. This is what we treat. We were having trouble with personal relationship. We do this in inventory. We couldn't control our emotional nature. That's an inventory. We're prey to misery and depression. But we had a feeling of uselessness, helping other people. We can't do that. We're full of fear. We're unhappy. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. So these are called the bedevilments, or there's a few phrases that are interchangeable. A spiritual malady, which is what we're going to use this as an example when we get to the fourth step. A spiritual malady, dry drunk, or untreated alcoholism. They're really the same. So in the doctor's opinion, if you turn the page again, doctor's opinion, there are 5 types of alcoholics. And it says the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult in much detail outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We're all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They're over-remorseful and make many resolutions but never a decision. There's the type of man who's unwilling. He can't take a drink at all. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand, his environment. There's a type who always believes that after being sober for a long period of time, he can drink without danger. Then there's the manic depressive type, who's perhaps the least understood by his friends, and whom a whole chapter can be written about. Then there are types entirely normal in every respect except for the effect that alcohol has on them. So they're often able, intelligent, friendly people. But this is the thing, regardless of what type of alcoholic you are, all these and many others have one symptom in common: they cannot start drinking without developing the phenomena of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be a manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been by any treatment, so treatment can't fix this allergy, by any treatment with which we are familiar to permanently eradicate it. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. not one day at a time, entire abstinence. So the thing to think about here, where they list these 5 types of alcoholics, uh, psychopaths, the man who's unwilling, he can't take a drink, uh, the guy who's sober for a long time, the manic depressive type, and normal in every respect. Right, there are 5 types of alcoholics. In the chapter more about alcoholism, they give stories about 4 of the 5 examples. The only one that they don't are is the manic depressive type, with whom a whole chapter can be written. And so as you read through these things, kind of see if you identify with one of these types of alcoholics. Um, I would like to believe or think that I'm uh, normal in every respect, except for the effect that alcohol has on me. But that's my delusion, right? I'm more like me personally. I'm more like the car salesman Jim. I plan various ways of drinking. In Jim's case, he put the whiskey in the milk, thinking it wouldn't hurt him on a full stomach. In my case, I did crystal with beer, thinking that the cops are out to get me, and it's because I'm tired. I've been working hard, and and so they're pulling me over at 2 o'clock at night because I'm swerving. So I do a little bit of crystal, so I stay awake, and then I wind up still getting arrested. And this time in jail, instead of passed out, I'm wide awake. So so I'm kind of like I planned various ways of drinking. I started out with peppermint schnapps when I was a kid. That kicked my ass, and then had a little wrestling match with Boone's Farm and and Mad Dog 2020, and then went to vodka, and that kicked my ass, and then and it had a little wrestling match with Bacardi 151, and that didn't work out so well. And then I tried box wine again, and that gave me headaches like you wouldn't believe. That really hurt. So I tried various ways of drinking. It never occurred to me, not to drink. You just got to find a way to drink successfully. And so I'm the kind who plans various ways of drinking. I'm the car salesman of variety described in the book.